Yeah, in terms of sustainability, I guess in a way you could say I was immune, very luckily, from that conversation for my first 9 years of my career. I got out in a really rough way 15 months
Right.
ago, having to make money and pay rent. I don't come from a wealthy family. I have not asked my parents for money in 15 years. And you have to find a way, and it's
Yeah.
not easy. And I think the people who make it seem easy either come from the honest answer is either come from wealth, come from
Right.
family money, or are lying. So the truth is that for the first year, took on crazy, horrible work that no one ever sees
Yeah.
or I talk about. We're talking about editing TikToks and social media video, live events, filming like concerts and things that are completely invisible. And I
Right.
just have been very, very careful about saving money. At the same time, my films have started to get a little bit of funding.
Good day, filmmaker Daniel Lombroso. Daniel, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled you're here. Normally, I would say somebody's project to start off, like filmmaker Daniel Lombroso with this, but I didn't know what to choose from. Earlier this week, you found out you were Documentary Story Lab fellow at Film Independent. You started Outerboro Films this week. I think you might be appearing on Nick Fuentes' show to fight against white supremacy. Gosh, you've had quite a week.
I have. It's been really exciting, and the highlight was being able to tell Nick Fuentes he was an asshole in person. And it appeared I hurt his feelings, and maybe he'll start to change.
I love that. And considering what you've gone through, that's a pretty high bar to that was a highlight. Your story is incredible. Grandson of two Holocaust survivors, which you highlighted in Nina and Arena, and you've embedded in hate groups, which is a pretty harsh way to start filmmaking. How did
Mhm.
you get involved in it? I can't imagine as a kid you were like, man, I want to hang out with Nazis and fight against hatred in this world. Like, how did you
Mhm.
decide to get into filmmaking?
I'm an entirely self-taught filmmaker, so I grew up in suburban New York, in New Rochelle. I used to bake brownies after school and sell them out of a shoebox, and I eventually saved up enough money to go to B&H Camera on the west side of Manhattan. I bought a little mini TV camera, which is right behind me, and I started
Oh,
making
cool.
just god-awful films, like every bad movie you can think of, with my friends dressing up in various things, playing basketball. I made some like weird surrealist historical fiction that hopefully no one ever sees and is on an old hard drive that hopefully dies soon. And then when I was third year at McGill, I'm from New York, but I went to school in Canada. We say third year. I studied abroad in Istanbul in Turkey, and I just loved it there. It totally blew my mind cinematically, journalistically. And I would walk around the city endlessly and photograph. And when I was there, I met this Turkish guy, Mehmet, who told me about this small Christian community in the southeast of Turkey called the Syriac Orthodox Christians. I feel like this is something you'd be into. They're a disappearing community. He said, I think that we can raise some money. And we went to his father's mosque, I'll always remember, and we were able to raise a couple $1,000s. I was just there temporarily for 6 months, and we
Right.
had my first ever director producer relationship, raised a little bit of money, and then we flew to southeastern Turkey to the border of Syria, and that's when I made my first ever documentary film. And I just became obsessed with the medium, that I could just meet someone in the street. This could happen. The barrier of entry felt so much lower than narrative. You don't need a lot of
Right.
money. So I just flew with a little DSLR and Mehmet, and we made my first film. And the Atlantic magazine saw that and hired me right out of school.
Wow. And then what led you to white noise? Did you always have those? Because it's not, these are weighty topics. What made you decide to do white noise from there?
Yeah, it happened organically. Since I was a kid, I've wanted to make films. I never knew how. I didn't know anyone in the film industry. I don't know that world. When Trump was one of 16 presidential candidates in 2015 or 2016, you might remember that time. Hard to remember now. He was covered in the entertainment section of the Huffington
Right.
Post. No one took him seriously. I was a young journalist at the Atlantic. I was 22 or 23. And I remember being on Reddit and seeing and 4chan and seeing so much excitement for this candidate. And everyone around me said he's a joke, he's not going to win. And I had a good sense from that time. And I remember talking to people in my department saying, there's this group called the alt-right. No one is talking about them, but they're throwing these big events and parties. Maybe I'll just go sometime. So I always remember calling Richard Spencer, who was the trust fund Führer of the movement, like the rich kid leader, bankrolled by his family. And I just will always remember nervously going into a phone room and saying, "Hey, Richard, this is Daniel. I work at the Atlantic. I'd love to come to an event with you." And I started embedding with him. And on my first ever shoot, I caught him the week after Trump won saying, "Hail Trump, hail victory." And he didn't throw a Nazi salute, but many of the people in the room threw salutes. It's a huge international story. And then Charlottesville happened 8 months later. You might remember that. And from there, we realized there was a larger story, and it just organically became a feature film because we realized it was journalistically important. It wasn't
Right.
market driven. No one gave us a pot of money to make it. We just felt like it was an important piece of journalism, a historical document.
And so this seems like a great through line. So was that the Atlantic when they hired you? Did they know they were going into video? Because it seems like right around this time, maybe a little bit later, but the New Yorker, the Atlantic were all doing these short form documentaries. Did they hire you with that idea? Is that you were going to make these sort of documentaries, or did that sort of evolve over the 2010s up to 2020?
So that was like the prime, the golden age of digital video. YouTube was rising, and that was the era of content creators. And my boss at the time, Kasha, who I love and respect, was so young. I think she was like 27. And she persuaded The Atlantic to start their first ever video department. That was probably 3 or 4 years before I joined. I
Okay.
might have been the fifth or sixth employee. And at its peak, we were maybe a 16-person department, and we were doing animated films, things for Facebook when that was a big thing, Instagram a little bit, explainer videos, short documentaries, and then eventually a feature film. Unfortunately, the department is no more. And during the pandemic, we were all laid off under the idea of video being expensive and that it became
Right.
difficult for the magazine to sustain. But we had an incredible, I was there for 5 years, Kasha was there for close to 10, and it was an incredible run.
But you see it. So you started Outerboro Films this past
Mhm,
week, and the tagline
mhm.
is a premium film studio behind award-winning documentary and narrative work. I think maybe you've added the narrative work because I think when I first checked it, it said documentary, and you may have
Yeah,
added the narrative work. Do you see this as a follow-up on your work through the Atlantic? And then I think you went to the New Yorker and did similar work
yeah.
as like a follow-up, and you think, okay, I can find a way to monetize this.
Monetize is a scary word, but I'm committed to making great films and supporting other
Right.
filmmakers. And when I was at the New Yorker, it was an incredible position because I wasn't only making my own work like Nina or American Scar behind me, but I also had a very small pot of money to support filmmakers around the world. A
Brilliant.
filmmaker in Ukraine, and we had this incredible year-long collaboration. I'd call him from, he'd be in bomb bunkers, and we'd talk about the type of art that we wanted to make that could help support him and what his country was going through. And that film got into Sundance and TIFF, and I supported filmmakers in the UK, and we told the story about the migrant crisis in Italy. And we made a film, an animated film in Iran about the persecution of women there. And so it was this incredible moment, I think, where magazines were continuing to invest. I think that moment is more or less over. There's just been a massive pivot away from original content creation inside of publications and a move towards social video and away from
Right.
16:9 and towards 9 by 16. I'm not going to be here being negative about that. I think you can't fight
Right.
technological change. That's the way people are experiencing video now. And if that's the way that publishers stay relevant, I completely understand that. I have great relationships with both magazines, but it just doesn't make sense for them in the same way
Okay.
it appears to support the types of work that I was doing. So now
Okay.
I'm independent, and I'm trying to find
Okay.
a way to continue to do that, making my own films, working with Carrie, who's incredible, and making her films. And then hopefully down the line, I don't want to get too ambitious supporting, producing and supporting other filmmakers too, in the way that I used to at the New Yorker.
But you must see, so this is interesting because I thought, okay, it's working at the New Yorker, so you're doing it on your own, but you flip that. You're saying like they're moving away from that. So you see Outerboro as a way to fill in something that has become like that they have moved away from. Like you see a market there that these publications have stopped doing.
The publications are so important because they allow you to reach massive
Right.
audiences. They make your films better. You're working with some of the best journalists in the world. The budgets aren't there, both in terms of the films getting commissioned. I had this window where I was able to support filmmakers. Those budgets aren't there in the same way. Um, and yeah, it's just I The trends are changing and the way people experiences video is changing. So those publications, I think and hope, will always be acquiring great films and hoping great ones as well. It's just getting harder. So it needs to be done independently. And they will always be places that I have relationships with and hopefully
Exactly.
continue to share my work when it's closer to completion. But the IP generation will now be done independently. I'm finding my own money, I'm raising my own funds, I'm applying for grants. I have an agent, I bring things to market to streamers as well. So it's just a different model. Yeah.
That's so cool, Daniel, and I think you're underselling how bold that is. So, do you see Outerboro as production, producing these and then putting them out for distribution? Do you see it like as a full film studio doing both production and distribution, TBA?
Yeah, so it's three of us full time. I founded the company actually about a year and a half ago, and then we went public this
That's the way to do it.
yeah, once we realized we already had a pretty big slate, which I could talk about afterwards. And at that, once we had a slate, and I realized, oh my God, I'm working with my two favorite people on all these projects. Guys,
That's
we have a
awesome.
company. We have a company. So Carrie Mack, who's my business partner, she's the executive producer. She comes from comedy. She's just an incredible producer, wrangler, salesperson, great taste, creative producer, and just her strengths are so different than mine. Her network is different than mine. So we're combining my world of journalism and documentary and hers of comedy and narrative. But we
Okay,
share this
awesome.
sort of like irreverent, funny, gonzo, fringy take on the world. And we realize the types of stories that we want to tell now are so overlapping. And so is our skill set. Like when we're sitting at the pitch table, we're able to highlight different things and complement each other. And I feel so much more confident when I look over and see Carrie there, who's our third employee, the head of production. Just an incredible, heartwarming story, and hopefully one that people out there buy because it could be them too. She was a student at Northwestern, and she DM'd me. She saw Nina and Ren at a film festival. It was her first ever festival, and I have the screenshot somewhere. And she said, "I'm so moved by this film. I also have relatives who survived the Holocaust, and I just loved it. I would love to be your intern." And I said at the time, "This is so sweet, but I work at the New Yorker. I can't have a personal intern." And
Although that would be funny.
it would be. It would also be a horrible look to just be walking around. Unfortunately, I'm not at that level yet, and I hope I never am. And then when I lost my job at the New Yorker, the majority of that department was also laid off. I've been through two layoffs, which is part of the story of this industry, booms and
Right.
busts. She reached out again, and she was at Northwestern
Smart.
still. And I said, "Okay, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. I have no money, but I need help. And I hate to have someone be unpaid, but do you want to just try for a month together?"
Right.
And she's
Oh.
actually the one who I said, "I have this crazy idea. I want to make a film about penis enlargement. Are you interested? I know it's weird." And she said yes. And we started coming up with a list of all the leading dick doctors in America. And she's the one who found Bill Moore, who's the main character in my feature length film, my upcoming feature film. And we started traveling together to Dallas. And I pretty quickly, through grants and just working independently, saved enough money aside to start a month or two in, started paying her. And now we've been working together first part time and now full time for almost a year and a half, which is incredible. And it just happened organically. So Rebecca was my everything in terms of like research, reporting, working with subjects, all the difficult journalism. I just trust her entirely. So it's the three of us. We're a little brain trust, Carrie, Rebecca, and I, and we're talking every single day about story.
Love it. And you're
Yeah.
referring to You'll Be Happier. That was a film that you got brought on by Film Independent as a documentary story lab. I wanted to read this log line. Follows a year in the life of Bill Moore, a gay businessman in Dallas striving to make penis enlargement as common as Botox. And I thought, oh, that's like I couldn't even think of that. Like you could put that in Chat GPT as what's my next feature, and even the AI wouldn't come up with something like that, Daniel.
I know, and I have a great executive producer, Penny Lane, to thank. I wrote the shittiest log lines for a year, and she's just, "Daniel, this is a movie about penis enlargement. Make it." And it's just an amazing window into masculinity today. Like, I think, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but the market being as bad as it is, not just about publishers, but this is a broader problem. There's just massive de-investment in certainly in political documentary. Streamers are great, and I have a lot of respect for them, but there's a certain kind of story that they're looking for. For a film to succeed today, I think, I mean, there's so many different metrics of success. There's theatrical, there's awards runs, there's community screenings, there's the all rights global deal that everyone dreams of with Netflix. You can
Right.
also broker sales in a million foreign countries. You can do grassroots. There's so many ways. But for a movie to cut through, especially on streaming services, I think it has, I could be completely wrong, but our guess and calculation with this film is that it has to have a buzzy hook, something that feels commercial, almost a little bit lowbrow. Oh, penis. Why is this longtime journalist spending his life in a penis clinic?
Right.
And you know what's so fun about the story is you start there, and then you start to realize, huh, this is deeper. It's really about the shame that men feel and body modification. The film is very right coded. All of the men in the film grew up religious in conservative environments. They continue to live with the baggage of what it means to be a conservative man or have
Right.
come from a conservative environment. Many of the men in the clinic are Trump voters. So I just filmed a mega church pastor getting his penis enlarged, which was crazy. And it just captured all the kind of the berserk nature of modern life in America, that this influencer megachurch pastor whose name I can't mention is so ashamed to admit that he has this insecurity, but also is
Right.
spending a huge amount of money to have it fixed, and also is letting me film it, but also doesn't want anyone to know. So it just
Oh
felt like
man.
an amazing vehicle for everything we're seeing at the national level with Trump and Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos. And we just
Right.
live in this age of insecure men running our world. And I just thought, what a fun way, what a commercial way to tell that story.
Yeah, and do you see that as Outerboro Films' first release, as your first film that you release as your studio?
Yeah, so we made it fully independently for the first
Wow,
8 months. I would just save a little bit of money editing little social videos or, you know,
that's awesome.
shooting concerts. And I would just fly solo to this penis clinic in Dallas. Then Rebecca started coming. Then in the summer, our first executive producer, Marcus Gershenberg, came on. Amazing guy. Big shout out to Marcus. And he believed in this film at a time when no one else did. They all thought it was too
R-
sexualized or too risky
Right.
or too political. Not having seen any of the material yet, but just believing that it was just too risky for this moment. And Marcus really believed in it. He came on he was so interested that he wanted to come see a surgery live, so he flew to Indianapolis to watch a reconstructive penis surgery with us, and then a couple weeks later joined as an executive producer and helped us scale the project up, and we started to hire crew with his help. And then after that, World of Wonder came on. That they're the creators of RuPaul's Drag Race. So now we're making the film in collaboration with World of Wonder, who is amazing. Randy and Fenton there, who created that just iconic franchise and believe in supporting risky independent films, and we owe so much to them. And then most recently, Sheila Evans, the vaunted head of HBO and for many years in MTV, also joined as an executive producer, which is awesome. And then it all started, I should mention, with Penny Lane and Gabriel Sedgwick, who were filmmakers I've admired for so long. And I just remember when I lost my job, I went to Penny's office and I said, I think I want to make this movie on penis enlargement. And Penny didn't even hesitate. She yelled to Gabriel's office and said, Gabriel, we're EPing Daniel's next feature. Hope you're excited. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but nothing beats just like the gig having people older than you think is a lesson. People who are maybe a generation above you in the community
Yeah.
who can see how hard you're working and how much you're trying, just the perseverance. And once
Right.
a few of them support you, things start to open up. And hopefully, in a way, I'm doing that for Rebecca and the next generation of storytellers at Outerboro.
I think we've set the record that hopefully will stay forever of the words penis enlargement on the podcast. But let's talk about festivals and documentaries. So let's say, okay, you've starting getting a slate at Outerboro. How do you release it? Because I'm thinking of like hot docs that should happen, and there's like hundreds of documentaries. I'm getting pitch after pitch. I can't even watch all the documentaries, and it
Yeah.
feels like it's almost a mirage for filmmakers to be like, you got into a festival, you got into this great festival, but what does it do for you? So like,
Yeah.
how do you see a documentary? You don't have to go into specifics about this, your documentary, but like, how do you see releasing a documentary in a way that it stays relevant and it catches people's attention in this current market?
God, it's so hard. Festivals are still central. There's all this negativity that sales they used to be. But if you look at all the Oscar contenders from last year, almost all of them started at Sundance.
Yeah.
Like it is still the launch pad. It's where critics are. The programmers there are incredible and just take such good care. at discerning what the important stories are and really elevating them. I've been lucky to lead produce two films that played Sundance, and they give you four screenings. It's just a level of access and platform that is unparalleled. But then also there's amazing films that have started at South by and gone the distance. A
Yeah.
friend of mine, Igor, produced a beautiful film called Queendom, started at South by, and a year and a half later joined the awards race and was shortlisted for an Oscar. I think just was nominated or won a Peabody as well as an Emmy. All of the traditional festivals are still incredible launch pads. We're talking TIFF, Berlin, Venice, Cannes, of course, Sundance, South by. But then also the other festivals, the documentary festivals, the regionals have done so much for me in my career. My entire network comes from the Big Sky Film Festival. That was probably the first, that and Doc NYC were probably the first festivals to really believe in me and support me in a deeper way, along and Mountain Film as well. And I just made it a habit to go every year, whether with a film or without. And so many of my creative collaborators come from those festivals, and especially from Big Sky. I would go to the parties every night and meet people, and I'd find editors there and producers I want to work with. And I met Penny Lane at her masterclass at Big Sky. I went up to her afterwards and told her I'm a huge fan. We hit it off that night. She went home and watched White Noise. I'll always remember, and sent me this beautiful email that I'll never forget. And now she's EPing my next film. So there's just no way. I meet young filmmakers who are in such a rush, and I was in such a rush. I
Right.
used to, from the age of 14 until 25, would edit an iMovie and burn DVDs and send it to Park City and never hear back. And you just do it long enough and you meet people and you just become invested in the social aspect because these people are your friends and you care about
Right.
them. And one day you're standing by their side on stage or at the party. So takes a lot of persistence. It's very rare to just submit to Sundance and get in. Once it becomes more of a lifestyle and something that you care about, it will start to open up for you.
But how do you keep so you're the perfect person to ask this because you've been laid off twice. But I remember attending like a film independent, like how to become a documentary filmmaker. And I forget
Yeah.
who the speaker was, but she said, we need to destigmatize working at the coffee shop. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. How do you feel about that? It feels like you didn't do the coffee shop, but you did tangential work. Like you worked for the New Yorker, you worked for the Atlantic. It may not have been like specifically what you wanted to do, which is run your own film production studio, but you were working like in the ballpark of it.
Yeah.
So beyond a coffee shop, what kind of advice would you give that documentary filmmaker who needs to, like you said, be persistent? How do they keep the roof over their head while being able to go to festival and not rush and all the things that you just said were your recipe for success?
My career is an anomaly. I was so lucky. I love magazine journalism. I love films. I love movies. I especially love narrative, actually, which is interesting, and that's why it's a longer term goal for our company, whether it's me producing or directing. Um, but I also love magazine journalism. I write, and I grew up reading The New Yorker, The Atlantic, The New Republic. I get 7 magazines to my house. It's like my only hobby other than filmmaking and eating is reading magazines. So I felt the Atlantic was always my dream to work at, even though I got hired in a 1-year position for a very low amount of money, like an extremely low amount of money. And the job description was to make like videos for Facebook. That wasn't what I wanted
Right.
to do, but being in a newsroom setting around smart people was my dream. And it was the most
Yeah.
fun 9 years being at those two places because you look up and there's David Remnick and there's Jeff Goldberg and Ta-Nehisi Coates. And Ta-Nehisi Coates would just walk over and pour us a glass of whiskey and talk to us about his magazine story before it came out. So I feel very lucky and privileged to have had that chance. And when you're in a newsroom setting, things can just happen.
Right.
Yes, I was supposed to do Facebook video, but the alt-right is important, and Daniel is the only kid in the whole place with access to Richard Spencer and these people. So let's let Daniel keep going. That was the beauty and how fluid it was. I don't think that I will ever be in that setting again. And with Vice shutting down and so many of those other sorts of environments, it's becoming less and less common. Yeah, in terms of sustainability, I guess in a way you could say I was immune, very luckily, from that conversation for my first 9 years of my career. I got out in a really rough way 15 months
Right.
ago, having to make money and pay rent. I don't come from a wealthy family. I have not asked my parents for money in 15 years. and you have to find a way, and it's
Yeah.
not easy. And I think the people who make it seem easy either come from the honest answer is either come from wealth, come from
Right.
family money, or are lying. So the truth is that I, for the first year, took on crazy, horrible work that no one ever sees
Yeah.
or I talk about. We're talking about editing TikToks and social media video, live events, filming like concerts and play things that are completely invisible. And I
Right.
just have been very, very careful about saving money. At the same time, my films have started to get a little bit of funding. We're talking about those deals that I've mentioned, a
Yeah.
little bit that I can set aside some for my team. I'm always applying for grants. Grants are very hard, but I have had a little bit of luck with that. A lot of my work is adjacent to the Jewish space and the Jewish philanthropy space. So I'm especially invested in the grant world there. All of my mission and effort around Holocaust awareness, I spend a lot of time doing that. And then you just have to grind. And a lot of what Carrie and I do, without going into too much detail, is trying to find independent investors and people who
Yeah.
care about documentary, think the stories we're telling matter, and you might take 100 meetings and get lucky with one of them. And if you're
Right.
just playing that game of ratios, eventually something will come through. And that's honestly a lot of what we do is pitching. And once in a while, you get lucky. That's the honest truth. All those things were mentioned: grants, hard work, shooting on other people's film, developing other
Yeah.
people's films. I produce for people. You just find a way over time. But it's not, it's a really difficult career. And I don't think if I had the 9 years at the New Yorker and the Atlantic, I'd be in this position.
That's awesome. That's such a great story. So the name of the your company is Outerboro Films, which I assume is from the being in Brooklyn. Everything out of Manhattan is considered the outer boroughs for somebody who doesn't know. Is there something special about New York specifically and indie filmmaking that makes it possible to have the company in New York? Could you how would the company be different, say, if it was in Los Angeles?
I think if you like follow me on Instagram, like all I do is walk around the city and take pictures of like funny characters on the beach and men with their bellies out or eating cabbage while in a speedo and whatever. And that's just, or the Diamond District or whatever. There's just like a sort of kind of Safdie, Sacha Baron Cohen, that
Right.
sort of gonzo thing has always been something I loved. And even if it feels lowbrow, I just think that there's so much honesty and authenticity in the lowbrow, in the fringe, in the things that people aren't interested in. And it can be highbrow. I think
Yeah.
to some extent, White Noise was made in that same spirit. Was these are a group of people that no one was taking seriously until they had power. And here is this kid who's the grandson of two Holocaust survivors seriously. And I think
Right.
it's always been what I've been interested in as a storyteller. Here are these penis enlargement patients who might be laughed at, and here I am listening to them and trying to understand where they come from. And I'll give you an example. I Everyone thinks, wow, must just be horribly depressed and sad, and some of that is true. That is part of the movie, hence the title. Um, Other people have entirely earnest intentions. I just filmed a brain cancer survivor whose last wish is to have a thicker penis, and it's sincere. It's entirely sincere. He came with his partner, and that's what he wants. He has a
Right.
limited amount of time to live. And who am I to say that's a stupid decision? So I think
Yeah.
the outer borough idea comes from that there's an outside way of looking at things. I don't really believe in like moralistic storytelling. It's very rare I don't think in any of my films, maybe American Scar, there's any
Right.
sort of solution. I just try to describe and show and document what's happening in a way that other people haven't seen and go places that other people aren't willing to go. And I guess the last point is the part of New York that inspires me isn't Manhattan. It's Queens, it's the Bronx, it's Staten Island, it's Brooklyn. It's
Yeah.
not even my part of Brooklyn, it's South Brooklyn, it's Coney Island and Brighton Beach. So it just felt so right for all of us. It's just what interests us and what inspires us in every way, both in New York and beyond.
Love it, Daniel. So, Outerboro Films, you've talked about You'll Be Happier. Is there anything else that you want to mention that people should know about? Obviously, I'll link the film studio in the film notes, show notes, so they can follow you along. Is there any other project that you want to mention that somebody might see in the next year or two?
Yeah, so making the sequel to Nina, my father is in his 70s and is trying to run a marathon on all seven continents, which is completely insane. He's done six already, including Antarctica, and he only has one left, New Zealand. but you'll probably see a through line. I'm interested in conservative masculinity. He's quite a conservative
Right.
guy. Like my grandmother, he doesn't open up about his feelings or his internal world. His mother is a Holocaust survivor. His mother is not Nina, that's my mom's mom. His mother, Shula, survived Nazi Germany on the Kinder transport. She escaped to England, and her entire family was killed, including her sister Clara, who she felt guilty about not bringing with her till the day she died. And my father in several wars, including the 1973 war in Israel, and lost a quarter of his high school class. 8 out of his 38 classmates were
Wow.
killed. And it's something he just never spoke about. I didn't think of my father as a veteran. I didn't think of the fact that he wouldn't like to hear this, but that he might have a kind of PTSD, that he's witnessed things directly and also inherited things from his mother that very few people deal with. And at the same time, he's an incredibly inspiring person who is almost 74, just tore his meniscus in his knee and is getting his knee fixed so he can run his 60th marathon in New Zealand, which is crazy, and his
That's
seventh
nuts.
continent. So it's going to be a short, but a bigger short, 25, 30 minutes from New
Nice.
York to New Zealand, and hopefully following him as he hopefully finishes his last marathon, and then looking back at the life that he lived and those kind of intersecting with those historical events that I described, much in the way that Nina does. So that'll be out.
I can't wait.
We're filming the New Zealand race in November, and hopefully it'll be on the festival circuit next summer. So like about a year and a half from now.
Can't wait, Daniel. So, Indie Film Podcast, love hyping other people's projects. You've shown throughout your career that really your connections and your ability to help out other people, I think, has directly led you to being able to start Outerboro. So, this obviously is part of your DNA, supporting other people. Is there an indie film or filmmaker you wish more people knew about?
Oh, interesting. Maybe I'll mention someone who I hope he won't mind, who I worked with at the New Yorker, who I think is just like
Yeah,
a generational talent. There's a filmmaker in Denmark who's a British origin named Omer Samy, and he made a film called Eternal Father about cryogenics and about freezing your body. Um, it's this older British man who had kids late and worries that he won't be around when his kids get older, so he explores freezing himself. And it sounds like a Spike Jonze movie, but it's just
right.
done, or Michel Gondry or something, but it's just done so beautifully and elegantly. And I have to say, watching Omer's films, I'm so jealous of how beautiful they are, the moments he gets. It's everything has a level of balance and sophistication that is so hard to do in documentary. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of his. I think whatever feature he makes next, someone needs to support because he will win an Oscar in our lifetime. I have no doubt about that. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Filmmaker Daniel Lombroso, I love chatting with you. As Nina said, which I want to steal after every conversation, she said it was very nice, except when it was annoying, which I was like, oh, that describes so many conversations, and it's just so beautifully done. Your work is truly brilliant, and I'm thrilled that you were able to join me for the podcast.
Thank you so much. This is our first interview about Outerboro Films, and it's a joy to be here. And thank you for asking such thoughtful questions. I hope we talk many more times in the future.